Today's episode of the Presleevables is brought to you by Tales of Adventure.
First of all, you're going to want to head over to toamagic.com. That's the website for Tales of Adventure, where you can find the best deals on singles and seal product from standard releases all the way up to vintage. For the higher end cards, those cards come with individual scans so you can actually see the card that you're purchasing before you make a decision. Also, be making sure to follow at TOA Michael on Twitter. That's the handle for the store owner, Michael Caffrey. He regularly posts sales and deals throughout the week, so you're going to be wanting to follow that account as well. Lastly, make sure to use promo code Resleevables at checkout for 8% off any order, and keep in mind that all domestic orders are shipped with free tracking. Again, that's toamagic.com, at TOA Michael on Twitter, and use promo code Resleevables at checkout for 8% off of your order.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Presleevables Wilds of Eldraine edition. Host Cedric Phillips at Cedric A. Phillips on all the things. Most Patrick Sullivan at Basic Mountain on X. There.
I'm going to be no-selling that for a little while.
Okay. Well,
maybe in time.
I'll break you eventually. Hopefully you joined us for our first video on the mechanics of Wilds of Eldraine, where we went over some of the new stuff that's going on in this set. Celebration, bargain, roll, along with the return of the adventure mechanic, which everybody kind of knows and loves. Today, we're going over our top 5 white cards. Now, my top 5 white cards are for competitive play. His top 5 white cards are for
the designs I like.
Okay.
Some of them will be powerful, some of them not. But it's just from a game design sensibility, cards that I appreciate how they're built, how they're crafted, the story they're trying to tell, something along those lines.
So this is my best guess at what I think is going to be playable in standard, pioneer, modern, maybe even older formats. Not Commander, because we're not Commander players, so us guessing at that wouldn't make a ton of sense. And then he's going to go over the stuff that he loves. Now, we do already share a card on the list. It's number 5 for me. It is the Regal Bunnycorn, which just kind of makes my list just because it's a funny name.
Okay.
As far as what this card does, it is 1 and a white, so it's a 2-mana rabbit unicorn, star, which we don't see much in Magic nowadays. Regal Bunnycorn's power and toughness are each equal to the number of non-land permanents you control. So at the very least, it's a 1/1.
Yeah, that's the floor.
That's right. Now, it could be a whole bunch more. There are a lot of things that make tokens in Standard right now, and I guess you could say that across a bunch of different formats. Some people have been kind of saying, even though this definitely isn't true, that it could be like a white Tarmogoyf. I don't really buy into that. But it could just be a big. And sometimes a big is what you're in the market for, right?
It seems very straightforward and easy to make this a 2-mana 4/4 5/5 pretty reliably if you're doing anything with just permanence.
Yeah.
I really don't know what to say. That's
how I feel.
Very open-ended in terms of the approach, and looks priced to move to me.
Yeah, you're making food tokens, or, nowadays, I don't know if you've noticed this, it seems like treasure tokens just kind of fly around in constructed formats, like definitely Standard. It's like, I just got a couple laying around from this going on, Saga's hanging around, so its power toughness could maybe fluctuate a little more than you expect. Because of that, who knows? I think it's just kind of a general big creature, not something you normally see in white, you generally see in green. And it was number 4 on your list, and why did you have a number 4 on your list as far as the design is concerned?
I really like giving the flood the board with various non-land permanents experience, which this is speaking to. Okay. Give the opponent a thing to hone in on.
Okay.
Often, the historical example that I go to sometimes is Ravager Affinity, of just all the permanents are interlocking, but there's no way to pick it apart.
Yeah, you couldn't do it.
There's no permanent with the spotlight on it that says, well, at least if I kill this, I'm kind of out from under what's going on. I have a little bit of time. This one is very much that. It's super charming, like just name and art and mechanic is just looking at people's reaction online. Clearly scratching some sort of itch here in terms of storytelling.
Yep.
I also really appreciate the discipline here to not just give it a keyword. Don't give it if it's power and toughness or 10 or greater, it gets blah, 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 blah. Yep. It's just, this is the simplest implementation of it. It's really, really appealing. I can't imagine doing this at 1. So 2 seems like the floor to me.
Okay.
But This sort of design space is kind of popular and ubiquitous enough that you don't want to just fire off one gigantic shot. You want to do this over and over again. So preserving the space to be able to make 3 and 4 mana versions of this that do something extra or care about, when your power and toughness is this, unlock something. You want to kind of leave the room, the breathing space to do that.
Yep.
This design does it in a way that's super appealing and clearly quite popular.
Rabbits, I would argue, underdone as far as a creature type is concerned, could really start making some people happy. And it's not oftentimes you see the rabbit unicorn combo. So there you go.
Not everything has to be scary.
That's true.
It's a trick that a lot of fantasy IPs get themselves into.
That's true.
It's just like everything has to be scary, everything has to be tense, everything has to be dramatic. And it's like, no, there's room for things that are whimsical and lighthearted.
Yeah.
People like mice and bunnies, and it makes sense to do that kind of stuff. I gotta give this a slight strike. I think that a rabbit unicorn should be legendary. Come on, that's a one of a kind. That's a one of a kind find.
That's a good call.
But that mild criticism aside, I think this is a really fun, sweet, and just charming design. Really well done.
Number 5 on your list for cards that you like the design of, Frostbridge Guard. It's a 2-mana 2/2 elemental soldier, 1 and a white, as far as the casting cost is concerned. For 2 and a white, and you tap this, you get to tap target creature. And then we've seen many tappers in Magic's history. Why do we like this one?
For exactly that reason. So tappers have a long history in Magic. You had to go pretty far back initially to get to Invasion, where there was a saturation of them. There was a ton of them at common.
Okay.
And people left Invasion thinking, well, tappers are just too good.
They're really good.
And Magic solved this for a long time by making tappers uncommon. Cool. That's a solve of sorts. But tapping is really iconic for white. Gameplay is very, very good. It gives white pseudo removal, which is something I think that's actively good to be doing, because you don't want to just blur the lines and say, yeah, you just give terror out to all 5 colors. Mm-hmm. That doesn't work.
Yep.
But it's also not acceptable for certain colors to just not be able to interact with creatures at all. Tapping is a great middle ground. Speaks to the color, sort of acts like removal, but not really, not all the time.
Yep.
So far, so good. Unfortunately, we have this history of the rate being too much. That gets us to Frostbridge Guard. And what I appreciate about this, the card does not appear weak to me by any stretch of the imagination, but most of the rate is nested in the fact that it's a 2/2 for 2. It's not super efficient at doing the tapping every turn game. That's sort of like an alternate mode, or if you happen to draw this thing on turn 7, okay, cool, that's probably what I'm going to be doing with it for the most part.
Okay.
But it's, I think, a very strong proof of concept that you can do tappers at common. They don't have to just be weak. You just can make the power, toughness versus mana cost and the cost to activate such that a lot of what you're doing with this thing is just attacking and blocking with your 2/2.
Sure.
The tapping comes up, but that's not necessarily every game, every turn. You have a white up and you're doing the tapping thing,
yep,
like you would in Invasion and some of the sets that came out after that.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like Whipquarter.
Whipquarter, great example. Although Whipquarter at least was a pretty good attacker. That one was actually good enough to play in Constructed.
Yeah.
But Master Decoy.
Okay. Yep.
The threshold tap 2.
Yep.
That's another example of it's really efficient at doing the tapping thing. It's not about attacking and blocking. And if all the tappers you ever make are like that, then you're going to draw the conclusion that tappers are too good to do at common or too frustrating. But you can do tappers in a bunch of different ways, including one that, yeah, it's kind of expensive to do the tapping thing. But the body's not bad for what you're paying. And you're going to play it a lot of the time. So there you go.
We're going to move on to my number 4. Now, one thing that's unique about a set that has adventures, some cards are going to be 2-in-1. My number 4 is the Cheeky House Mouse / Squeak By. So, Cheeky House Mouse is a 1-mana, single white, 2/1 mouse. Okay, that's Elite Vanguard, that's Savannah Lions. We've seen that in Magic's history, but with a different creature type. Now, Squeak By, the other part of this card, the adventure part, is a single white sorcery. Target creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn. It can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater this turn. It's going to squeak right on by.
Oh, yeah.
This is like a nice effect for a white deck. that's trying to get under you and try to basically have a way to finish the game in some way. You know, if it's going up against like a green deck or something, easy to just, pardon the pun, squeak by these bigger creatures that you wouldn't be able to attack through normally. And then of course there are going to be some games where you just play a 1-mana 2/1 to get the game started. And then of course there will be games where you do both. You know, you're playing a game, getting a little longer, and in the mid game you play a squeak by, and then you play a cheeky house mouse, and you're getting a lot of value for your uncommon. Just seems like a general card that would go into a mono white aggro deck.
Well, the floor is awfully high.
Yeah.
Because you're just getting a Savannah Lion / Elite Vanguard in the worst case scenario.
Yep.
And where there's often a bottleneck on these sort of decks being good is just a lack of 1-drops.
Yep.
Magic gives you a lot of good 2 and 3 mana creatures nowadays, but hard to build a beat down deck out of nothing but 2s and 3s. You need to have a critical mass of 1s. And even if this is pretty modest by today's standards, the fact that it is a 1-drop and it is a useful card to draw later on in the game for all the reasons you're mentioning, wouldn't be surprised if this one found a home in Standard somewhere.
Yeah, I kind of dig it. So I am happy to see the printing of this card, and fingers crossed that there's some sort of aggressive white strategy that I can play in Standard, or heck, maybe it's good in Pioneer. I don't know.
Perhaps we could have the intersection of our interests.
Talk to me.
Boros.
Love a Boros deck.
Me too.
Really do. We already know your number 4 is the Bunnycorn. So I'm going to go to my number 3 now for constructed, which is Expel the Interlopers. This is a new mass sweeper variant. So for 3 white sorcery, choose a number between 0 and 10. Destroy all creatures with power greater than or equal to the chosen number. It's a variable wrath, I guess I would say. You can build your deck to great effect with this card where it does not impact you and ideally impacts your opponents. Now, it does cost 5 as opposed to 4. We don't really see a ton of sweepers at 4 mana that take care of everything cleanly like the Wrath of God days. You can see cards like Depopulate and others where there is a little bit of a drawback on them. But this one, there's some huge upside here if you're able to build your deck the correct way, I think.
Oh, for sure. This almost made my top 5 list until I realized I wasn't 100% sure how it worked.
Okay.
But no, I you know me, I'm a big fan of sweepers that say, yeah, play with a creature. Try to set something up.
Yeah.
Or you keep one or whatever.
Yep.
This is a little hard to set up because it's not just have the big thing. This is really, really good against big stuff.
Yep.
This, you kind of like want to have the smallest thing somehow. Mm-hmm. Not the most intuitive thing, but, you know, your 5 cost for a sweeper like this is typically a little overcosted, so you want to like be getting what the extra juice is out of this. And if you could find some cheap utility creature that plays well alongside this, then you can keep your thing. Or even things, right? That's like really the ceiling of this card is you could potentially keep your entire board. Yeah. It's not just about one thing.
All right, number 3 on your list is the Toonvale Guide. We've got a 4 mana, 3 colorless, and a single white, 2/3 Fairy Scout. It's got flying, and it has Celebration. Toonvale Guide gets +1/+0 and has lifelink as long as 2 or more non-land permanents enter the battlefield under your control this turn. What's the deal? Why do you like this?
Flying and lifelink are 2 mechanics that play really, really well together.
Okay.
In small doses.
Okay.
Because the downside risk on flying and lifesteal is, you know, I'm talking more low power games, draft. It's, well, can't block it, can't race. What am I supposed to do here?
Sure.
But it is popular and appealing for much the same reason. Attacking while gaining life is really satisfying for players who like to play aggressively and for players who like to play defensively. Mm-hmm. Not easy to get that. This does a really nice job of sort of, again, spacing it out. It's not deterministic it's going to do the thing. There's going to be some turns where if you don't do the celebration, you're going to actually want to hang back to block because this is statted well to block. But it gives you just a taste of that flying and lifesteal experience at a low rarity that requires some setup or some decision making. It's not just trivial to have it going on the entire game, but it does give you tactical moments of being able to play your 2 cards, however that looks, and then get a nice hit in.
One thing I kind of like about this too is I think a little bit more about celebration. There might be a time where, you know, you have 1 card in your hand that's like a permanent, right? And you're just like, you draw a card and it's a land, and it's like, okay, well, do I want to play this card, or like, do I want to wait until I can play 2 things and then celebration triggers and I do that? Like, that's actually like a gameplay decision that seems kind of fun.
Yeah, it's nice that, or, you know, maybe on this turn, instead of playing my 5-drop, I want to play a 2 and a 3.
Yep.
Because I want to, the celebration matters this turn, or I think I can trigger the celebration over and over again. So I just want to be kind of on that path down for the next couple of turns.
Yeah.
A ton of decision making.
Yeah, I think that's actually pretty cool. So I didn't think about that originally.
Yeah, there's the only like downside risk of with celebration that I think, because it is pretty, you can't stack it up because all these things are on again, off again from turn to turn.
Yep.
So it's not like playing 10 things, you get 5 triggers. The mechanic doesn't work that way.
Yep.
You sort of touched on it a little bit there in your example, which is it does exacerbate flooding out a little bit, because the paralysis in the spot that you're talking about is, well, if I was already flooding out, that could be potentially a little frustrating.
Yeah.
But that's really small in the scheme of things compared to how much I like a lot of what else is going on here.
Number 2 for me is Virtue of Loyalty. It is another adventure, so we'll start with the main card, which is a 3 white enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Untap those creatures. Okay, love it. Ardenvale Fealty is the adventure aspect of this. It's a 2 mana, 1 and a white instant. Create a 2/2 white knight creature token with Vigilance. So up front on turn 2, you've got something to do. Make a 2/2. It's got Vigilance. It's a knight. Maybe the creature type matters. Vigilance, well, a white ability generally. So a little attacking, a little blocking. Okay, great. And then on 5 mana, you get to cast the other part of this and go boom. At the beginning of my end step, my people get bigger. I get to untap them. Now I'm attacking. Now I'm blocking. I don't know. Seems pretty powerful.
And I know in the decks that you've played, a difference between white aggro and red aggro is often white has just more staying power. You have better expensive plays, and it comes at the expense of being like less bursty typically.
Yep.
This card seems like it kind of fits into that slot in a way that's very efficient, just because, the Cloud Goat Rangers of the world, the Gideon Planeswalkers, whatever, those can definitely have a role. But playing cards that actually cause you to commit to having 5 mana can be a little bit rough.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a really nice middle section of, certainly the 2 mana play is not that exciting for 2 mana. The 5 mana play is maybe not a card you would typically play with, but if you're getting both options for the price of one,
you're happy.
That could be enough to get it over the line.
Yeah. And you can definitely tell with the adventure portion of this card, that card's not a card you would play on its own, like you mentioned.
Right.
Just a 2 mana, 2/2 knight with Vigilance, like a token. I don't know, depending on the format. Like nowadays, you're probably not going to play with that card, right? Like you're actually more likely to play with something like Raise the Alarm, because if you're playing a deck with Raise the Alarm, it's got some implications of like making 2 tokens is better than like one big one.
Including Celebration now. Also
that. Look, you can't get it by him. I like this card. I wouldn't be surprised. Like if there's some sort of like white aggressive deck. There was a white mid-rangey deck. There's like a mono white mid-range / control deck back in like April that was pretty good. So maybe we'll see the reemergence of a white base strategy. Who knows? Number 2 for you is Archon of the Wild Rose. 2 dub 4/4. So it's a 4 mana 4/4 Archon. Flying. Other creatures you control that are enchanted by auras you control have base power and toughness 4/4 and also have flying.
So I do like having the aura experience that's asking you to spread it out a little bit.
Okay.
My critique of the aura experience historically is stack tall. Make one huge thing.
The Boggles experience.
Exactly. Make one huge thing and either assume that your opponent can't kill it, or put it on something that's so hard to interact with that that's going to be the game.
Yep.
Something that says put one aura on a bunch of different things breaks up that play pattern. That's a hard thing to nail, like in terms of rate, because the incentives are so strongly the other way. Okay, so we're talking about a 4/4 flyer at the floor. So we're not talking about a big ask to spread out the love a little bit. I also like the fact that it basically copies this thing. One, for the complexity's sake, just everything's a 4/4 plus whatever the aura is doing to it.
Okay.
But also there's a story here between the enchantment, the art, the card type of it sort of bestowing its nature to you in a way.
Sure.
It's not purely mechanical. There's a story being told by this card. And when you combine that with the incentives, I think being really, really positive and a hard thing to get right. I appreciate this design. I would guess it's probably on balance a little bit short for standard level play, just because it's parlaying a bunch of different things to become powerful and effective. Like this needs to stay around, and you need to have creatures and the auras. It's asking a lot.
It is.
Right? But I appreciate the effort, and I think this card's going to be super fun in casual play, even if it doesn't show up in competitive.
All right, everybody, it's time to go to number 1 on my list. I have what I think was a pretty easy number 1 here, all things being told. It's Werefox Bodyguard, 1 dub elf fox knight. You don't see a lot of creatures nowadays with 3 creature types, but here we are. I think 2 of those will probably matter than the third, the elf and the knight aspect. So it's a 3-mana 2/2. It's got flash, and then when Werefox Bodyguard enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 other target non-fox creature until Werefox Bodyguard leaves the battlefield, and you can pay 1 and a white to sacrifice this Werefox Bodyguard to gain 2 life. So, maybe a stretch, but I'm gonna go with it. Like, best Fiend Hunter ever?
Could be.
Yeah?
I mean, there's a lot here. Now, yes, I think this card is clearly much stronger than Fiend Hunter, but losing a point in toughness on this sort of design is not a trivial thing.
That does matter.
Like a lot of what you're paying, a lot of what you want here is the solidness of the body because you're doing the faceless butcher thing.
Yep.
But this can also cut the other way too, right?
This attack a little better.
No, I'm saying this shelters your own creature too.
Oh.
So you have this as best white card in the set, and you didn't even know that it can also blink out your thing and do a little Resto Angel thing.
Missed that.
This might have some rate.
I missed that entirely.
Yeah.
That's kind of nice.
Yeah, because I was looking at this thing. You want to know how I got there?
Yeah.
I was like, this is cool, and it seems pretty pushed, but I can get what's going on here. I was like, this is a weird bodyguard story.
You know, I didn't even think about that now until you mentioned it.
It was like, I'm just exiling. It's like, maybe it actually protects your own stuff too. And then it does.
And then you can sacrifice your thing to get it. Okay.
Get the thing back too.
Yeah,
So it's also coverage against removal.
Yeah. Okay, that's pretty nice.
That's a sweet design.
That's a pretty nice card.
Yeah, I also, just from a little design bit, if you have a card that is this pushed and is pretty good against creatures. Now, it will also be good with creatures, depending on circumstances, but it is clearly somewhat hostile towards creatures.
Yeah.
I just love non-fox. 1, the story.
Sure.
Like, foxes can protect themselves.
We're not killing each other out here.
Yeah, exactly. And 2, it's just a little metagame adjustment. Maybe you just play a couple more foxes if the car's all over the place.
If they're out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if it ever comes up in a competitive setting, it's really funny and charming. And it also makes it feel like your card choices matter.
Sure.
This is not good against foxes. So put some foxes in your deck. I don't know what to tell you.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, that's a really good catch. I completely missed that you could exile your own creature and then obviously get it back, and if it has enters the battlefield ability or protect your own thing. No, that makes total sense.
I know I talk a lot about tone and story and all of that, and I think that stuff matters on its own regard, but also it does help you teach how the cards work.
Yeah.
I would have totally glossed over this because they make 1,000,000 Fiend Hunters, right?
Yes. Yep.
They make 1,000,000 Fiend Hunters. I would have totally glossed over it, except the word bodyguard made me think that's kind of weird. Then I went back and read it and I was like, oh, this can also blink out your stuff.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have gotten there if it was just called like Werewolf Explorer or something.
You know how I would have learned? When my opponent did it.
Did it?
Yeah. I'd be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You can't do that. Your number 1 card is Cooped Up.
Yes.
It is 1 and a white, so it's a 2-mana enchantment aura. Enchanted creature can't attack or block, and then you can pay 2 and a white to exile enchanted creature.
Very simple. I'm not talking about constructed here, almost certainly.
Yeah.
I really like doing something like this in a set that has an enchantment theme going on to it. It's a little non-intuitive because you exile the enchantment as part of the thing.
Mm. Oh, you exile enchanted creature as part of the thing.
Well, but this will also go away.
Yes.
I'm saying for synergies that are counting in play.
Gotcha. Okay.
If you make enchantment matters, then you're naturally expecting people to play with more naturalizes in their deck.
Yeah.
And so there's this weird tension with the pacifisms of like, yeah, it's nice to be counting up enchantments potentially. but also this is not nearly as reliable as it's going to be in most worlds because we're pointing people towards going and blowing up enchantments sort of game one.
Okay.
So what's the out that we give them here? And I really appreciate, you can spend some mana for the insurance of
Sure.
I've actually got rid of the thing. I also really like exile compared to destroy. Part of that is color pie and flavor, but also part of it is one of the nice things about pacifism is that it doesn't trigger leaves the battlefield death trigger kind of stuff. That's part of what it's worse than removal, but that's one dimension where sometimes it actually is better because you're not triggering certain things. So exile alleviates the tension of I pacified your thing with a death trigger and I'm worried about my pacifism getting blown up, but if I kill your thing and trigger whatever, it feels kind of bad.
Yep.
No, we don't have to worry about that. It's a no-brainer if you want to do the thing. There's no additional complexity associated with it. And I think this is a nice package to give in a set that cares about enchantments with some of the baggage that can come along with that sometimes.
I think I would agree with all of those things. I think white here, some nice cards here. Nothing crazy, but some pretty nice cards as we take a look at our top 5 list. For me, it's Regal Bunnycorn, Cheeky House Mouse / Squeak By, Expel the Interlopers, Virtue of Loyalty, and I want to make sure I get the second part of this card. The adventure portion of that card is Ardenvale Fealty. And then the Werefox Bodyguard. Patrick's list has the Frostbridge Guard, Regal Bunnycorn, Tunavale Guide, Archon of the White Rose, and Cooped Up. That is our white preview, I guess I'll say, since this is the pre-sleevables and not our white review. Mechanics, of course, we've already done, so you can check out that video. White, you just watched. And coming up next, blue cards.
Yeah.
How do you feel about blue cards?
As a rule or here?
You know what? As a rule.
Pretty negative.
Okay.
But here, pretty positive.
Okay.
I like what's going on here.
All right, fair enough. Blue cards coming up in our next episode. Make sure you join us.